Welcome to the 129th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's podium. For over a century, this stage has united visionaries and leaders from politics, business, community, and the arts to share insights on the most pressing issues of our time. And with Canada in a pivotal moment, it's more important than ever that we come together.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. So I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon again. I hope you enjoy your lunch and you are having a great time. My name is Martin and I'm honored to be your host today. And I would like to welcome the people who are looking at us and watching us online at canadianclub.org. Our ability to host timely and impactful conversations is thankful to our generosity of our partners. Today's event is proudly sponsored by BMO and Torres. Thank you very much for your support. As well as I'm grateful for our season sponsor, Canadian Banker Association, our official or airline partner, Air Canada. Canadian Club Toronto is proud to partner with Canada's Forest Trust Corporation for a third consecutive year as our executive natural partner. By 2028, we are having a plan to plant 4,250 trees together, capturing over 800,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide through the lifetime. Before we move to the program, a quick reminder of how we can engage today's discussion. If you'd like to pose a question to our speaker, please use the question card on your table. We collect them and share them with today's moderator. For those joining us visually, you can use the Submit a Question button on the right hand of your screen. We also encourage you to share your experience on today's event on social media and visit our website at canadianclub.org. We'll like to have you as a partner, as our member, and to see you in our future events. On our agenda and remarks are from Mr. Graham, followed by a conversation with Rita Chishur. At this time, I would like to invite Carrie Cook, Global Head of Investment and Corporate Banking at BMO Capital, to officially introduce our guest of honor, John.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of my BMO colleagues, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. We're delighted to host this lunch in honor of our client and great partner, John Graham, President and CEO of CPP Investments. John is responsible for leading the organization on its critical mission to help ensure a strong foundation of financial security in retirement for millions of Canadians. Today, the CPP Fund has over $714 billion in assets under management, placing it among the largest pension funds in the world. John brings a unique perspective to this role. Before entering finance, He earned a PhD in physical chemistry and spent 9 years as a research scientist with the Xerox Innovation Group. John is also credited as the inventor on 36 patents, and he's published 16 peer-reviewed journal articles. That innovative spirit continues to shape his approach to leading one of the world's most important funds. After John's remarks, he will sit down with Rita, senior business writer and columnist with the Globe and Mail, for a moderated discussion. Please welcome me in joining John to the stage.
Right, well, thank you. And don't worry, we won't talk about chemistry. It's great to see everyone today. Thank you so much for coming. Great to see so many colleagues in the audience, so many friendly faces here today. And as some of you know, this fall we had a major milestone in the Graham household. My son finished university in the spring, and he started his full-time job this September. It's a big deal, right? It's a big deal when you enter the working world. And when your child enters the working world, you want them to go into it with enthusiasm and with the belief that they have opportunity ahead of them. So we started in September, and you won't be surprised that I took the opportunity to talk to him about his pension. He was very confused why we were talking about something that was 40 years down the road, but the power of compounding, right? The power of starting early. We filled out his defined contribution forms. We talked about the pros and cons of a TFSA versus an RSP. And I am not a certified financial planner, so I don't give financial advice, but we talked about the pros and cons, and we talked about CPP. We talked about what CPP is and how it fits into a retirement plan with a workplace pension with savings. And he got it. He understood what CPP is, and he's my son. He doesn't work for me, so he doesn't have to pretend, but he got it. He really understood what CPP offers. And the one thing that resonated with him as a 22-year-old is the concept of fairness between generations. The CPP reforms, and CPP investments, it's about a lot of things. It's about lifting and keeping seniors out of poverty, but it's also about making sure that tomorrow's workers aren't left paying for yesterday's bills. And that balance of pension security for our parents and opportunity for our children, it is one of Canada's greatest triumphs. And it didn't happen by accident. It happened because nearly 3 decades ago, leaders from across this country came together with the courage to act. And that's the story I'm going to talk about today. I know many of you have heard it before, but I think it's important to remind on the story of the CPP reforms and the creation of CPP Investments. I also realize that sitting through a lecture on pension history is not on everybody's top of the list, but trust me, it's exciting, it's riveting, and in all seriousness, it really does represent one of this country's greatest public policy success stories. So we're going to go right into the history, and we're going right to the beginning, to the creation of CPP. CPP was created in the 1960s to solve a crisis of senior poverty. And think about who was retiring at that time. People who had lived through World War I, had lived through the Great Depression, had lived through World War II. And these events, they robbed them of a chance to save. So by the time they aged out of the workforce, they didn't have enough savings to retire in dignity. And the response was pretty simple: create a pay-as-you-go program. Money comes in from workers, and it goes straight out to retirees. And at the beginning, the model worked. It may have been a little bit too generous to the first set of retirees, but poverty rates among seniors began to drop. But demographics were also changing. And demographics are like a slow-moving freight train. Once they get going, they're really hard to stop. People were having fewer kids. People were living longer, which is always a good thing. And it meant a pay-as-you-go system was breaking. In the 1960s, there were 7.7 workers per retiree. By the 90s, 5.5 to 1. Today, I think it's around 3.4, and it'll be down to 3 in a few years. If too few workers are paying in, a pay-as-you-go system can't keep up. And that's exactly what the Chief Actuary of Canada said in 1995, that without action, the CPP would be depleted by 2015, and contribution rates would need to go up to 14% just to keep the lights on. So what happened? Canada stepped up, and there's some people in this room who were involved. And what makes this story remarkable is that our federal government and our provincial governments, they didn't pass the buck. They didn't look for a short-term fix. They partnered to fix it. And it's not always appreciated, and it's sometimes forgotten, that CPP is a federal and provincial construct. The provinces and the federal government work together. So leaders from across this country came together, across parties, across all levels of government. They sat down and they made tough, unpopular choices. Choices that would deliver benefits long after their careers were over. And that takes courage, and it took a lot of cooperation. They increased contribution rates, benefits slightly decreased, and they created CPP Investments, the institution that I have the privilege of serving. And just imagine how controversial it would have been at the time to make choices that you knew would probably be really unpopular with the electorate. It's really remarkable. And they did it with 3 policy objectives. 1, ensure the long-term financial sustainability of the CPP. 2, avoid volatility, future volatility in contribution and benefit rates. And to the extent possible, reduce intergenerational unfairness. And this led to a simple but powerful design. Create a pool of assets, the CPP Fund, that could be invested professionally with the sole goal of further enhancing the economic sustainability and resilience of the CPP program. And it created CPP Investments as a professional, independent money manager that invests these funds without political influence. So fast forward to today. The plan is safe, secure, for at least the next 75 years. Intergenerational fairness has been significantly improved, and you and I have a system we can count on. And without that reform, today's younger Canadians, like my son, like your children, would not only be paying for their retirement, but for their parents. And instead, we in Canada now have a national pension system that is considered the gold standard globally. And these reforms were bold, but good policy, it only matters if it works in practice. And that's where CPP Investments comes in. Since inception, we have grown the fund to $731 billion, and around $500 billion of that, let me repeat that, $500 billion of that is investment income that was earned all around the world, and yet it all comes back here to Canada in the form of pensions, to be spent by retirees and their families across this nation. Now, earlier this year, we were ranked as the world's 2nd highest returning pension plan over the past 10 years. So I sometimes get asked, and maybe I'll get asked later, does this mean you're just chasing returns at all cost? And the short answer is no. Our mandate is to maximize returns without undue risk of loss. And that means we're focusing on long-term investment performance that supports plan sustainability. We're not focused on short-term outperformance over public benchmarks. We are focused on building a resilient portfolio across a wide range of macroeconomic conditions that is consistent with the policy objectives we were created for. We're not chasing the latest hot market. We never have. And in fact, right now, we're not chasing the US equity markets, which we think are actually too concentrated in a handful of technology stocks. And if we chase the US equity markets right now, we'd be exposing the fund to too much concentration risk. Now, last year alone, the Canada Pension Plan paid out $61 billion to 6.6 million Canadians. And for many of those monthly checks they get from CPP is the single largest source of retirement income. For someone who earned about $50,000 a year through their career, CPP today is about 57% of your retirement income. And remember, that is the majority of Canadians. And one thing that I really do want to emphasize is when Canadians get their CPP, they earned every penny of it because it's a pension plan. And when you get your paycheck and there's a line item deduction that says CPP, what you get in return is a promise. A promise that when you retire, you will get a pension. You'll get a pension that is protected against inflation, and you'll get it for as long as you live. If you live to 110, 120. And we know Canadians are scared of outliving their savings. You're not going to outlive your CPP. And our sole job at CPP Investments is to do whatever we can to keep that pension promise to 22 million Canadians. And when we compare ourselves globally, the strength of the system we have is even more evident. Look at the United States. Social Security is still a pay-as-you-go system after 90 years. And it's projected to face insolvency in 2033 without a change to benefit levels. In Canada, the unity of our country in 1997 created a CPP with a solvency horizon of 75 years and beyond. Which is why countries all over the world ask me, how'd you do it? How did Canada do this? And it is an achievement we can all take pride in. But now is not the time to take a victory lap. Now is not the time to borrow from future benefits to pay today's bills. So I do want to spend some time talking about our investment activity here in Canada. And while we invest globally, we also are invested domestically and looking to grow our portfolio domestically. We have about 12, 13% of our portfolio here, about 120 billion, earning great returns. And when Canada offers the right opportunities, we step in. And chances are you see and you touch our investments domestically every day. 407, A&W, Dollarama, Shopify. And we've been supporting Canada's largest energy producer, Canadian Natural Resources, for over a decade. We're also financing infrastructure of the future, like one of the data centers that's being built in Cambridge. And right now, we're actively engaged on opportunities related to energy, which we've always been very keen on, and opportunities related to digital infrastructure, which is something that we need going forward. And we're not the only ones. I've gotten more calls over the past probably 6 months from large international investors who are really curious about investing in Canada because they see the potential. But here's something that I have learned from working with the biggest and the best investors in the world. Capital is fluid and capital is mercenary. It will always flow to opportunities of least resistance, to opportunities in well-functioning, stable, predictable, and transparent economies, to opportunities in unified markets that reduce or eliminate unnecessary friction. And that's why I am so encouraged by what's going on in Canada right now. Policymakers of all political stripes, federal and provincial, working together to unlock this country's potential. And I'm confident they can do it. I'm confident they can do it because they did it before. They did it in 1997 with the original pension reforms. CPP Investments is the product of national unity. And Canadians have $500 billion in investment income to show for it. And growing, and growing. That's what unity is worth. $500 billion and growing. If Canada can showcase unity and coordination, capital will flow and support the enterprise of our nation. And not because of rhetoric, and not because of emotional appeal, because capital will find its way to markets that work. That unity and coordination will initiate the nation-building project Canada requires, and those are exactly the projects that international and domestic capital, including us, are eager to invest in. So let me leave you with something that makes me optimistic. Canada's pension plan works because nearly 3 decades ago, leaders had the courage to act with discipline and a long-term mindset. They made decisions whose rewards would not belong to them, but to future generations. That courage and spirit of cooperation delivered something few countries have today: a solvent and stable and globally respected national pension system. And going back to where I started, we put ourselves on a path to generational fairness. Canadians can now face the future with confidence that their pensions will be there, not just for today, but for decades to come. And my job is not to reinvent anything. My job is to carry forward the discipline of the 1997 reformers, to strengthen the pension that Canadians rely on today, and to secure it for generations to come. Canada solved the pension affordability crisis. That is a Canadian achievement. It shows what we can accomplish when we work together and put the long term first. And it's something every Canadian can take pride in, and every generation can count on. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As you heard before, my name is Rita Tritcher. I'm a senior business writer and columnist with the Globe and Mail. And I have the pleasure of moderating the Q&A today with John. And John, I just want to start out by thanking you for affirming my parenting style, because I too have had the pension conversation with my eldest, who's in his second year at McGill. And you're right, generational fairness is the #1 thing that young people are concerned about today. So I'm glad that that is something that's top of mind.
As soon as I said generational fairness, he perked up.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So for members of the audience, we will be taking questions. So there are question cards on your table. So if you have a question for John, I'll try to take as many of them as possible toward the end of our discussion. Please write them down. Someone will be coming by to collect them. Okay, so John, you talked about this already in your remarks. There is a misconception out there that CPP Investments is meant to maximize returns at all costs, and somehow that's its raison d'être instead of, ensuring the fund's sustainability. I want to ask you to just dig into that for a moment. Where do you think that misconception comes from, and how are you going about correcting it?
Yeah. So we are, I think, quite disciplined about looking to the CPP-IB Act in how we invest. And the CPP-IB Act lays out the objects for us. And we're here to invest, and we're here to maximize return without undue risk of loss, taking into account the factors that impact the funding of the plan. So there is some more language in there. And we interpret that as meaning that we are here to, in a literal fashion, maximize the return, which is why we run at a level of risk that may be slightly higher than some pension plans, but one where the portfolio is designed to be resilient and resilient across a wide range of macroeconomic conditions. We spend, and I have colleagues in this room who spend a lot of time traveling this country, educating Canadians on what we do and how we do it. And they do a fantastic job. So we follow kind of a combination of a ground game, of being on the ground, speaking to Canadians, speaking to the kind of key thought leaders in the space, and then we try to reach Canadians through other channels. I think one of the things that is interesting to me is just how there's misconceptions about CPP. You know, we will still hear that CPP is not going to be solvent. Mm-hmm. And that's something that was brought up in the mid-1990s. So we're still working on that one. It takes a long time to get past some of these beliefs that are embedded in the population.
Okay. We all know that there's pressure, including from some politicians and market participants, for the Maple Leaf to be more invested in Canada. And I've taken the view in my column that it would be a mistake for Canadian pension funds to veer too far from their central mandates on this front. I want to talk to you about the issue of independence, and specifically, why is it important to preserve the independence of CPPIB's decision-making for investments?
Yeah, we'll start with independence, and I think if you asked people, and I get asked this question, what is the secret to success of CPP Investments? I say it's political independence, in that we are able to invest in what we see as the best opportunities and in the best interest of 22 million contributors and beneficiaries. That singular mandate and that ability to be focused on it, I think has been incredibly powerful. And frankly, that's where a lot of people get it wrong. I actually brought this, and I'll read it. It's a quote, and I won't read the whole thing, trust me. I'll read one paragraph, because it's on the mandate. The simplicity of this mandate has, in my view, been the cornerstone of CPPIB's success. By placing the focus of maximizing returns, all other potential distractions are eliminated. Markets don't need to fret that investments are being guided by political considerations. Managers are liberated to pursue the best possible financial strategies, and pensioners can be reassured by the fact that CPP will be used to benefit retirees and only retirees. And that is from the Right Honourable Paul Martin. And I think it sums it up well, that having that singular mandate and focusing on returns. One thing I'll also maybe just take the opportunity too, that we obviously hear this, and we are heavily invested in Canada, and we're looking to grow it. Right now, we're actively engaged on some of the most interesting investment opportunities we have here in Canada, and we think Canada offers a lot of potential for both domestic and foreign capital. I think what is lost a little bit in this discussion when they talk about the Maple 8 is, remember, the Maple 8 are pension plans. And it's getting back to that pension promise. Anytime we talk about the asset, and I hear numbers of $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion, $2.5 trillion. I don't know how they come up with these numbers, and they seem to be growing faster than the plans are growing. But what they're not talking about is the liabilities. The money's already spent. And CPP Investments is a hybrid plan. The last actuarial report for CPP Investments, the liabilities are $1.7 trillion. So when we talk about the pension plans, you got to talk about both sides of the balance sheet. You got to talk about the assets, and you got to talk about the liabilities. These are not savings pools. These are not just, this isn't money in someone's bank account. It's actually earmarked for a pension. And I think this is what I've been trying to communicate, and with others, we want to invest more domestically. Frankly, we've had an opportunity issue where we just haven't seen the opportunities. That's why I'm super encouraged by the major project initiative and some of these initiatives. But if we're going to have this debate, we have to have it in the context of a pension plan and not a savings account, which is where it's kind of devolved to.
Okay, well, you just mentioned the government's major projects list, and obviously, as my colleague James Bradshaw reported over the weekend, Ottawa is very eager to attract investment for these projects from pension funds and other institutional investors. So let me ask you, how do you, as CEO, think about investing in Canada? What makes a good opportunity?
Yeah, as I said in my remarks, I think Canada has it has the ingredients as a great investment destination: stable, predictable, transparent. We like to see opportunities of scale. We like to see opportunities where we can grow our capital. We like to see opportunities, again, where you can infrastructure, in long duration assets. And so we are really encouraged by what we're hearing and really encouraged by the kind of major projects initiative. We're not policymakers, so we're not involved in choosing projects. We're not involved in that. But we're watching it very carefully, and some of them we're familiar with. I've been sharing for years, what makes a good investment destination. And I'm also encouraged by the speed at which we're trying to move. And I know from my investing career, speed matters. And you got to get momentum going, because once you get some momentum and once you get some inertia, it's hard to stop it. And so I think it's, you can see in other parts of the world, they're moving at pace, and it's important that we move at pace right now.
Okay, well, this kind of brings me to my next question.
Am I jumping
for you.
ahead? Sorry.
No, this is good. What changes or conditions are required in Canada to continue attracting capital? Given your druthers, what would you like to see? Is it just the pace of change?
Well, I think, and this has been, I think, pretty well discussed and talked about. And I alluded to it in my remarks of removing frictions, removing any unnecessary complexity. And look, I know capital moves. Capital is fluid, and capital just will find its way to areas that work. And the other thing is capital will just disappear overnight. Capital will speak with its feet, and it'll disappear overnight, and you'll wonder why. They never said anything. They just kind of vacated in the middle of the night. And so I think what's really important is to remove unnecessary frictions and make it easy to invest money.
Okay. So this is going to be the understatement of the year. This is a time of heightened geopolitical risk. And you've already talked a bit about your perspective on the U.S. But there, we have this trade war that the U.S. has launched. The BRICS are trying to present a counterbalance to the West, and there is armed conflict, including in Ukraine and the Middle East. How are you thinking about geographic diversification, given absolutely everything that's going on in the world today?
Yeah. Certainly, the world's changed. And I think about investing even 5-10 years ago, and it was never easy, but maybe it was easier in that investing was about following the money, and capital would flow to where there was profit maximization. And now, as you highlight industrial policy, national security, these have a pretty big influence on how capital is flowing and how people think about geographic diversification. But to answer the question, a term we also use is diversification is an act of humility, because we don't know. And we don't know exactly how the world is going to shake out. And we continue to believe that it is important to be geographically diversified. And we have a very diverse portfolio. We continue to invest in Asia. We continue to invest in Europe. We continue to invest in the US and Latin America. And in fact, in many ways, our geographic allocation isn't changing that much. Because anytime you pull a dollar out of one investment, we're always fully invested. You got to decide where to put it. And there's no safe harbor in the world right now. And we weren't created to put the money under a mattress. We were created to invest it. And so if we want to pull money out of China, we got to think about where we're going to invest that money. If we're going to pull it out of the US, we got to think where we're going to invest that money. Things that are certainly top of mind for us would be the fiscal position of governments around the world, where that sits today. Obviously, we're, like many, thinking through the US dollar and the role of the US dollar and how that could change over time. But recognizing that I think there's a tendency to try to create this black and white view of the world, that the US dollar is either going to be the reserve currency or not. And there's a whole bunch of gray between that. It'll go from the reserve currency to a reserve currency to a currency. And where are we on that spectrum?
Okay. Of course, you mentioned U.S. equities in your opening remarks. But I just have to ask you, how are you navigating the changing business environment in the United States?
In what way?
Just the constant chaos.
So, I mean, you got to take a long-term perspective. You got to be very long-term, and you have to look past the noise. I mean, at its heart, investing is about finding that signal in the noise. And right now, I mean, people say it's a very volatile time right now. If you look at the markets, they've actually been on quite a run. It's a really noisy time right now. It's super noisy. And through this time, we've stayed invested. We've stayed largely on the course we've been on, which is a long-term course. So right now, I think one of the really important things is sometimes to push the noise aside and look through to the economy, look through to the fundamentals, look through to the market. Like I say, things that we're discussing, markets are pretty fairly valued right now. You know, multiples are pretty high. Earnings expectations over the next year are pretty robust. These are the things as an investor that we're really focused on.
Okay, so is this kind of unpredictable policymaking by governments now considered the new normal for investors? Or are you looking at this as a medium-term period of volatility?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know if this is the norm now, but it is something that we have to adapt to. And you know, as a long-term investor, we certainly believe in mean reversion, but we also believe that sometimes regimes change. Is the world just going to be noisier for a whole bunch of reasons for the foreseeable future through our working careers? It's probably the base case. And we just have to, you know, it's like, we can't lament on the past. We just have to get the organization prepared for the future.
Okay, so the last time you and I spoke was actually
3 years ago?
Yes, at another Canadian Club Toronto event. A member of the audience asked you a very interesting question about CPP's approach to investing in China.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if you can explain whether that position has changed at all in recent years, given all the geopolitical developments.
Yeah, China is it's the world's second largest economy. And, you know, our appetite for a geography will ebb and flow. And over the past few years, our appetite for China is not what it was a few years ago. But I do believe that it is important for CPP Investments, with the capital that we manage, to maintain the ability to invest in China, to maintain that exposure in the portfolio as the world's second largest economy, to maintain the optionality for the organization, with the view that if we didn't, the people who are sitting in these seats in 10, 20 years would curse us, that we lost that knowledge and we lost that ability. So with any geography around the world, the discussion we have is, one, how much should we have? And two, how should we get it? Public versus private. How do we think about what sectors, what parts of the country we should focus on? So we have maintained an exposure in China, and I think we would continue to maintain an exposure in China.
And are you taking a similar approach to the other BRIC countries? Or is it on a case-by-case basis?
Well, India, we have an office in Mumbai, so India is certainly a country that we have been invested in. Brazil, we have an office in Sao Paulo. Now, Russia, we didn't invest in Russia. We made a decision 10 plus years ago that Russia was uninvestable from a governance perspective. So we had no direct investments in Russia. Teams were not looking at anything in Russia. And that served us well.
Okay, yes, absolutely. Okay, there's a question here from the audience. Could you talk about opportunities in private credit?
I can. I mean, talk about a market that is hot, right? Private credit. Yeah, and for those who don't know, I mean, for the majority of my time at CPP Investments, I was the global head of credit. And to me, some of the dynamics in private credit are also just part of the evolution of the market. I think you always have to worry if a part of the market gets too much money in it. But I actually think some of the dynamics are here to stay. And I think private credit has an important role to play in financing the economy. You think about private credit versus your traditional banks. And private credit, it wants the asset, it wants the loan. And it usually wants a non-investment grade loan. But it doesn't necessarily want the client and everything that goes with it. It doesn't want all the fees and all the services that have to be provided to the client. Some of the financial institutions, they want the client, but depending on the cost of keeping that on the balance sheet, it's expensive. So they want the client and they want all the business that comes with the client, but they don't always want the asset. So to me, there's a natural synergy for private credit in the economy. And private credit, I don't believe it's systemic, unlike banks. So you have these private credit managers that have grown incredibly large over the past few years, where they have very large balance sheets of private credit, where they are financed by pension plans, endowments, foundations around the world. Now, we also know that every asset class has its moment in the sun and its moment in the shade. And undoubtedly, right now, private credit is hot, and I was reading articles today about some of the subprime borrowers and challenges they're having. As it hits an equilibrium, there'll be some pain. But overall, I think private credit serves a really useful purpose in the economy.
Your next career will be diplomat. Okay, here's another audience question, and we only have 3 minutes left, so
so take 4.
Okay. What long-term risks to the plan keep you up at night?
What long-term risks to the plan keep me up at night? That's interesting. That's an interesting question. So what are some of the really long-term things we're thinking about right now? I'm actually going to give one that's a little bit probably more short-term, which is the first one. We are big believers in diversification. We are big believers in building a diversified portfolio because, as I mentioned, diversification is an act of humility. And what we see going on right now with a few companies just driving the markets in the U.S. in particular, getting back to your question, is this a regime change? Are we going into a winner-take-all market where a handful of companies will extract excessive rent from the economy? We don't know. And we aren't chasing, as I mentioned, these markets. But we also, eyes wide open, this could go on for a really, really long time. And so that is something that, on a short-term basis is painful because we're watching these markets, but we're making a deliberate decision that we should not concentrate the portfolio at that level. But if we are in a winner-take-all, in a new type of economic paradigm, then this could go on for a very long time.
Okay, well, on that cheery note, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. But I would really like to thank John for sharing his insights, not just about the mandate, but your approach to investing. It was extremely insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita. And thank you for having me. Hello, George.
My name is Rob Pritchard, and on behalf of all of my partners and colleagues at Torys, I have the honor of thanking John for his appearance today. I'll say it frankly, I'm a great admirer of John Graham. He serves Canada with great distinction as he leads one of our most important institutions. He's both brilliant and humble at the same time. He's equally comfortable in private markets as he is in public policy. He has an outstanding record as an investor himself, but an equally strong record as a fiduciary on behalf of 22 million Canadians who participate in the Canada Pension Plan. We are incredibly fortunate as Canadians that he's devoted his life to serving all of us. John, thank you for your service, for your steady leadership, and your unwavering passion for Canada. You represent us around the world as an exemplary Canadian, reflecting the very best of our nation. Your appearance today has confirmed all of this that I say. You're a Canadian patriot of the first rank, and on behalf of all of us present today, thank you for making such a compelling case for the Canada Pension Plan investments, and thank you for having our backs as Canadians. We're greatly indebted to you. Thank you.
I said this would be one of the best sessions ever. Thank you very much, John. I'm truly inspired. It's grateful to see this. It's amazing to see, you are. And the whole time I was thinking about what a bright future Canada has by having, 30 years ago, people put this in place and having someone like you run it. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm pretty sure everyone enjoyed it, both here and people online who joined us. And thank you, Rita, for moderating today's session. I would like to also thank BMO and Tories for your sponsorship, and also VVC Live for running the whole event. Before we close, I would like to talk to you about a couple of our coming events. On October 9, we are welcoming Caroline Rogers, Senior Deputy Governor of Bank of Canada, for a special breakfast event. On October 15, Nicole Butcher, CEO of OPG, will join us to speak about driving Made in Canada energy solutions. And on October 22, we are hosting a conversation about Indigenous participation and project development in Canada. Again, thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you for those who joined us online. I really hope you are having a great afternoon. Thank you.